Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the episode of Policy Hub, which we have started in order to project an optimistic and a realistic outlook of Pakistan. This session is all about Pakistan, optimism, and hope. And this session is about the reiteration of the national narrative of Pakistan that is going to instill motivation and guidance into the people of Pakistan for a better future. Currently, Pakistan is facing a myriad of problems, starting from the political precipice, a sluggish economy, the facing of disintegrated social development, and some technological gaps in comparison to the other South Asian nations and technological backwardness. These obstacles have already created a problem for us, which means that the people, especially the youth of Pakistan, have a very pessimistic outlook that has developed as a result of these things about the future of our homeland. As a result of this oblique view, individuals are experiencing not only a cultural crisis, leadership crisis, but also the identity crisis. To address all of this in this talk, we have with us today Mr. Shahid Najam, who is the Vice Chairperson of the BIPP Institute of Public Policy. We are delighted to have him with us today. He has worked within Pakistan and also served as a government servant. However, he has also had the privilege of working with the UN system for a good 22 years. Welcome, sir. Sir, first of all, I would like to ask you that could you please walk us through the vision and the national narrative that we were introduced by the Qaid of this nation, this country, Qaid Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah.
Thank you very much, Eamon. I must felicitate you for initiating this series of Policy Hub aimed at giving hope and optimism to the people of Pakistan. It's extremely important for us to revisit and reinterpret the narrative that we had when Pakistan was created. To start with, let me briefly dwell upon as to what narrative connotes. Narrative is the expression of a national vision, aspirations, and resolve for having coherence, connectedness, a sense of identity, a sense of shared identity, which constitutes the basis of the nationhood and the structures of the state. When Pakistan was created, what Iqbal and Qaid had envisioned for Pakistan was a democratic Pakistan, an inclusive Pakistan, a Pakistan which ensures and secures the rights of the minorities, and which was not a theocratic state. It was a state which was, in a way, presenting an enlightened view of Islamic ideology. Over the years, however, we have deviated grossly because of many aberrations that we have experienced all along. And if you look at the kind of challenges that we have faced in all these 75 years, there is an array of mismanagement functions that we have done. And these challenges range from political, economic, ideological, environmental, governance, and name anything, I think in every walk of life. And we have been perpetually in a state of crisis. And I believe this is essentially because of lack of ability for us collectively to adhere to or to present or to interpret a narrative which ought to be there to give us a shared identity.
So what I can gather from what you've said is that our founding father's narrative that he presented to the nation was about progression, inclusiveness, and he wanted a place for all the Muslims to experiment with their Islamic teachings without any hostility from the outsiders or the contemporary nations. Okay. So, sir, considering that, as you just mentioned, that some challenges are being faced because we are not adhering to the very principles of that narrative in the first place. So, could you please delve a little in detail about those challenges? You just mentioned, for example, some political, social, etc. A little bit into the detail would do.
Yeah, but you know, there's a list of challenges that we have sort of tried to encompass in my initial submission. For example, look at the political crisis that we are facing, right from the start of Pakistan, immediately after the demise of Qaid and then of Liaquat Ali Khan. There has been an unfortunate, sordid saga of the politicians who were more interested in retaining power instead of establishing the democratic norms and orders. Look at the political parties, look at the situation now which we are facing. So the politicians which ought to have established the institutions, provided us the vision, created a democratic society and order, those politicians have miserably failed all along. Look at the role of bureaucracy. Instead of being objective, neutral, impartially, it has reduced itself to a state of servitude and servility. No more it is the public interest. It's the interest of the ruler, which somehow all the bureaucrats and most of the state apparatus is geared to serving. Look at the army. Look at the episodic excursion, intrusion into the political arena from 1958, 1977, and the Musharraf era. Look at them. The army continues to somehow, in the backstage, manage the politicians, and the kind of relationship which has emerged, that it is a kind of symbiotic relationship between the army and the politicians, with the result that the two true democratic institutions and orders which promotes pluralism, which allows the interest to articulate its preferences, which allow the people to give voice to their priorities, which allow the institutions at the grassroots level to develop, enabling the people to determine their own destiny. You don't find the kind of vertical integration of that voice. Why? Because of the relationship that has evolved over the years, with the result that the political institutions continue to remain fragile. Even today, if you look at the political landscape, it's a very sad and sordid comment on the way the country is facing the political crisis which continues. Look at the role of the judiciary. The scales of justice are no more there. It's a sale of justice most of the time. Look at the role of the enlightened groups like the lawyers. It's the Wukla Gardi, which has been accepted as a norm by the state and by the judiciary. Look at the institutionalized commercialism of the medical and education system in this country. The constitutional rights enshrine upon the government to provide universal primary education. Where is that? Look at the role of women. We have denied all over them. And as you were mentioning the other day, we are, I think, 153 out of 154 in terms of the Gender Transparency Index. Look, we are 154 out of 189 countries on the Human Development Index, and we claim to be the 5th largest in terms of population and 26th or 27th largest political economy. Look at the role of ideology. Where is the version of Islam which provides people to exercise and expand their choices freely, which allows the minority to exercise their rights, which protects the rights of the minority and provide them the equal opportunity to give expression to their rights, not only, but they could also expand their choices. It's the very, very convoluted and distorted interpretation of Islam. And we have not been able to mainstream the madrasas into the proper education system. So, I mean, it's a very, very tragic comment on the way that the various segments of the society. And I believe you cannot apportion the blame to the single institution. But if you have to, then I think basically it was the politicians who ought to have assumed the leadership as the leadership was exercised by Qaid-e-Azam. So, I mean, we have to therefore deal with these challenges and the chaos that we are facing. And the only thing that we need to do is to articulate a very coherent, collective narrative which gives us a shared entity.
On that note, I have a separate question for that, but before that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd just like to submit a correction for the mistake that I've just made. It is not the Gender Transparency Index, it is the Gender Development Index. So, sir, now towards the next question. So we have already discussed the challenges. The challenges you've just mentioned in detail, these are the ones that, of course, are very grave in nature, but they require some pressing, pragmatic methods and measures to be overcome. And this is exactly why the dilemma of the youth that I've just mentioned in front of you, that the youth seems to question their Pakistani identity now. Sometimes they just do not feel as proud and as confident being a Pakistani that their forefathers even laid their lives for the country. So what should be the way forward? Some pragmatic measures that come into your mind? May they be in any arena of administration or governance or politics, whatever. So please.
I think I would. There are 4 or 5 elements on which we need to work and they have to constitute a composited and integrated part of the narrative that we want to portray. But before coming on to the specifics, there are a couple of observations which I would like to make. Number one is that somehow we have to emancipate ourselves individually and collectively, and to move away a fragmented, narrow interpretation of Islamic ideology. And we have to somehow portray and project a true spirit of Islam to the people. That is one thing that we have to. What I mean to say is that Islamic ideology has to constitute an integral part of the narrative. But this Islamic ideology should not be hijacked by those who wish to protect their own sectarian or religious interests, or who wish to use Islam to advance their political ends. So somehow we have to, in that narrative, ensure that we project a holistic ideology of Islam, the true spirit of Islam, which is essentially equality and a system based on justice. That is number one. Number two, it's extremely important for us not to throw out of the window the cumulative historical wisdom that we, in this part of the world, we seem to possess. Um, there has been a millennia-old ethos, civilizations, socio-cultural system, rules of morality, rules of livelihood that we have espoused and inherited from Indus civilization through Gandhara civilization, through Islamic civilization, Sikh Raj, British rule towards the freedom movement. So all those elements that gave us or endorsed us with resilience, with creativity, with survivability and social affinity, those have to constitute again the integral part of the narrative. So these are the two observations which I think must be there while articulating or reinterpreting the narrative. Now, there are 4 or 5 elements around which we need to weave or present the narrative. Number one is, of course, as I said earlier, the strong and sound ideological foundation of Islam that those foundations have to be the basic for articulating or reinterpreting our narrative. But again, as I said earlier, it's the true spirit of Islam that we need to somehow project, which is based on equity, equality, and justice. The second is that I think Quaid-e-Azam gave us a very good motto, which was unity, faith, and discipline. If we somehow could adhere to the unity, faith, and discipline, these 3 principles which he expounded for the nation were very comprehensive, and we need to somehow very religiously adhere to unity, faith, and discipline. The third element is that, again, which derives from the historical Pakistan movement, the struggle, and the ideology which was portrayed by Iqbal, and the vision which was articulated by Quaid, that we need to establish a democratic order. And democracy without accountability and good governance is worse than dictatorship. So we have to therefore ensure that the democratic order takes precedence over everything else. And the rule of law, and then the constitutional supremacy and rule of law. And I think we have to, in the development paradigm, somehow ensure that we pursue a paradigm which is sustainable development and development with equity. And finally, I think it's the rights-based approach that we need to espouse. And when I say the rights-based approach, it is the rights of all the citizens in Pakistan, where we protect, we respect, and we create environment for the people to exercise and expand their rights. And that these rights are not confined to the rights of elite or a few rich. These are the universal rights which are available for the people. Right to justice, rule of law, right to life, right to food, right to pharmacy, right to health, right to education. So we need to somehow very, very intricately, very, very intimately, we have to integrate it into the national narrative. And the challenge for us is, and I think it's a formidable challenge, that somehow we have to make sure that while we are propounding or forming a narrative which derives from Islam, that ensures that we give a national territorial configuration to the Islamic ideology. That Pakistan, nation state, takes precedence over the external relationship or alliances or allegiances that we have. That we are a sovereign, independent country in its true spirit. And this national territorial configuration, Pakistan as a basis for nationhood, is absolutely critically essential. And we will stop looking up to the external past for seeking our religious or ideological inspirations, provided we are fully well committed to ensuring that the territorial integrity and sovereignty of this country is not compromised. And I think if we have to bequeath a better Pakistan to our children, to their children, we need to therefore articulate, adhere, propagate, and then somehow comply with the narrative which we come up with.
Thank you, sir. So thank you very much for taking time out for us. I'm aware of your busy schedule, but this was important not only for the organization, but also for the development and the interest of the country. So, ladies and gentlemen, with this, we come to the conclusion of our segment. I hope to see you next time, and I also hope that with this information, we are able to foster some interest and enthusiasm about the country within the people, the citizens, and educate them that what it really means to be a Pakistani, how the vision of Pakistan was created, and how unfortunately we have deviated from the very principles and the spirit that was enshrined in the narrative. Um, until next time, look after yourself and be careful. Another variant of COVID has been let loose now. Stay safe. Goodbye.
Thank you.